Hello everyone and a very warm welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be revisiting Down in Flames Wild Blue Yonder. Yes, it's proving a very good season for card-based war games and this is one of my favourite. The reason I'm coming back to it now is because I've had a few messages from some of you, both sort of via YouTube, but also a couple face to face and by email, asking me what I think of the 8th Air Force 1943 campaign, and in particular the detailed fuel status rules that the game comes with. Now, I'm going to start off by saying that I really like the fuel status rules because they add this extra wrinkle, a level of detail to an already very good simulation of air warfare. But it gives you one more thing to think about, and it really brings out the unique characteristic of the bombing campaign against Germany, where you did have to worry about fighter fuel endurance. And of course, both sides had problems with this because, of course, the Germans never quite had enough interceptors for everything, and their endurance, even over friendly skies, was problematic. But the problems the Germans face pale into almost insignificance compared to the difficulties the Allies face. So in the early part of the US Air Force's campaign, where much of the defending, or I should say escorting fighter forces provided by British Spitfires, which, for all their excellent qualities, are quite short-legged aircraft at the end of the day. And I like how the rules in this game really flesh that out a bit. And of course, as the campaign progresses, once you get to Operation Pointblank, slowly better and better aircraft become available. And of course, as the Allied player, you would appreciate having the P-47, which is the long-range workhorse of the defenders of the 8th Air Force, if you like, as they try and hammer their way into targets in Germany. So what I'm proposing to do is I'm going to play a mission over the course of the next couple of videos, basically one of the Operation Pointblank missions from the 8th Air Force 1943 campaign. And I'm going to play it utilizing the complete optional fuel rules, just so you see how it works. I want to give you an honest sort of impression of just how much additional paperwork is involved. It's not a lot, but it's significantly more than you'd get in a basic campaign. And also share some of my impressions as the mission unfolds as to what I think about the fuel rules and why I think they're quite well done. So I'm afraid, as ever, when one is prepping for a major air mission, everything begins with the necessary campaign paperwork beforehand. So I've got my campaign sheet, I've got my 8th Air Force campaign log. I see lots of empty boxes to fill in. And also, because I'm using the optional fuel rules, I have the more detailed fuel status log, which is sort of tacked onto the land campaign log. So ignore all that on the top. For the purposes of this exercise, we're only interested in that. So as with any campaign in the Down in Flames stable, we draw a card to determine the mission. So as I say, I'm playing the Operation Pointblank campaigns, and we have a vertical roll, which means that my lucky bomber crews are going to be bombing target 17. What's target 17? Ooh, we're going to be bombing Castle. All right then. Industrial center. Okay, so we're going straight for the big target. So in a move that will be familiar to many Down in Flames players, I will begin filling in my target sheet. So this is mission 1. We are bombing... sorry, trying to get my hand around the camera. Castle. And the target is an industrial center. Apologies for my handwriting. It's probably looking like complete gobbledygook on this, but I'll do my best. At least you know it's Castle and we're bombing an industrial centre. Never mind my surgeon's handwriting. So we've got that. It also tells me I have 6 B-17Fs for this mission, so that's going to be a biggie. So just to bring that campaign sheet back, 6 B-17Fs. They'll be at high altitude, and that is a long trip indeed. That is a very long trip. 15 turn unmodified 15 turns in and 13 turns back out. That is a long, long way. Okay, so working that out, I'm just going to have to grab myself some B-17Fs to remind myself how quickly they fly. Here we are. So your garden variety B-17F has a speed of 6. So cross-referencing that against the range to the target, it is going to be 9 inbound turns, and assuming damage and other horrors don't do terrible things to us, it's going to be 7 outbound turns. Now this is very handy. I like the inclusion of this sort of graph here, because it lets you plot your turns in a very easily referenced way visually. And if you want to make little notes here, it's equally useful whether you're using the basic fuel rules or the more advanced ones to be able to note when your flights are joining the bomber formation, who's pitching in. Now, I'm going to do this in a bit of a crowded way, and what I mean is I'm recording Allied and German resources, etc. on the same sheet. Normally, in a two-player game, you would each have a sheet because, of course, you'd be choosing your resources secretly, and you'd be putting down stuff that you don't want your opponent to see. But such are the risks when you play these things solitaire. I'm just going to go for a fairly crowded worksheet. So now that I've got that sorted, the next thing I have to do is choose my resources. Now this is another very familiar step to Down in Flames players. Every campaign comes with a set of resources, and usually they are aircraft. Sometimes they're things like flak guns. If you're the attacking player, it reduces the strength of the flak. If you're the defending player, it increases it. And you get ace pilots included in the mix sometimes. Now, in a normal Down in Flames campaign, you would only choose one resource from a block of the things. But 8th Air Force is different because not only does it give you your standard resources, it also gives you condition resources, target bound turn resources, over the target resources, and special augmentations if your target is in Germany, which in this case it is. So you are entitled to the German augmentation. If you're wondering what those little arrows are, because these resources lists are shared between both the early 1943 and the Point-Blank campaigns, anything to the left of the arrow is a 1943 resource, anything to the right is Point-Blank. So in theory, for this mission, I'd be entitled to choose one of these, one of these, one of those, one of those, and one of those if I was feeling greedy. However, while I like to pack a punch in first missions, I tend to be a bit wary of burning through too many of my resources. Now, this campaign is 6 missions long, and you'll notice that some of these resource boxes only have, the conditions only have 5, the others have even less. So playing this as I normally would a campaign, I am actually going to not choose any of these because I want to save them for later on in the campaign. They'll probably be more useful then. However, as I say, I do like to pack a punch on the first mission. So out of all the resources available to me here, I am going to be very greedy and choose option 4, which gives me 2 leader wingmen Spitfire 5s, no, sorry, 1 leader wingman element of Spitfire 5s and 2 leader wingmen elements of P-47s plus the US Ace Semka. So yeah, that is a tad greedy, but what can you do? So I'm just going to cross off 4 to remind myself I've done it, and I'm going to put down 4. Now, whether I'm playing the Allied or the German side, I tend to think in about the same way. So if I was controlling the German side against an Allied player, I'd do the same thing. I would save these other resources for a rainy day when I had a better idea how the campaign was progressing. And so for the moment, I'm just going to stick to the interceptors available for Operation Pointblank. And looking at the options, I tend to go by numbers because German aircraft in campaigns of this period tend to all be pretty good. So leaving aside the weak ones and going for numbers, I like the look of that one. There's no ace pilots, but I get 2 leader wingman elements of BF-109G6s, the Messerschmitts, and 2 leader wingman elements of Focke-Wulf 190s. So can't really say no to that. So I'm going to cross that off. And at the other end of the resources box, just to keep these guys separate, I'm going to put a 6. So the US side has chosen their resources and the German side has chosen their resources. As I say, I could have chosen more, but it's the first mission of the campaign and I want to hit the enemy hard, but at the same time, I don't want to overcommit. So now comes the interesting bit where you have to start deciding where you want these various elements to come in. And B, when you want them to do stuff. So when you are playing the advanced fuel rules, you have to pay attention to this. And this is the fighter fuel endurance chart. Now, unlike the basic fuel endurance rules, where I don't know how clearly you can see that, but they abstract it to BF-109s and Spitfires being able to hang around for 3 turns. All other aircraft can hang around for 4 turns, and then they have to perform a disengagement. In the more advanced one, it's a bit more nuanced. So you can see the various models of BF-109 have different fuel levels in their drop tanks and their internal fuel. And other classes of German aircraft have different values. P-47s start off with awful drop tanks. Well, not that bad, but you know what I mean. In the early 1943 scenarios, improving to a capacity of 8. Spitfires have a lot in their drop tanks, but less in their fuel tanks. So this is where the planning and the thinking it all through comes in. Now, if you were using the basic fuel rules, you would fill in these much simpler boxes, but I am going to be using this one. Now, to enable me to fill in the aircraft for both sides, I've basically put a little star to remind myself that that's the Allied one, and a little cross to remind myself that that is the German one. So let's start with the Allied side. So I've got my leader and wingman element of Spitfires and my 2 sets of leaders and wingmen of P-40s. So I think I'll start by allocating the Spitfires. So it's mission number 1 and the unit is Spitfires. First mission turn. Now this is important because the decision you have to make here is how soon do you want these guys to join in? Now, I could have them right from the start, or I could have them join in a bit later. So the rules for burning fuel in this for the escort fighters is that if you join the bomber formation partway through, you burn 1 level of fuel or 1 point of fuel for each box where you're not present, but you're assumed to be en route. You're just, flying at a fairly economical speed, I assume. Once you've joined, your fuel consumption changes. Once you're with the bombers, if there are enemy fighters in the vicinity, you spend 5 fuel points every turn. Now that represents the crazy fuel consumption you get from high-speed maneuvers in a dogfight where you're driving your mount at full power most of the time, trying to get your edge over the enemy. That burns your fuel at frightening speed. If you're with the bombers and there are no German fighters present, your fuel consumption is 2 per turn. So that, I mean, it's an interesting way of abstracting the fuel consumption involved in escorting a bomber formation. It does work fairly well. So my question now is what to do with the Spitfires. So according to the chart, the Spitfire 5s, which is what I've got, have drop tanks with a capacity of 10 and internal fuel tanks with a capacity of 9. Aircraft will always work through their drop tanks first before using their internal fuel. Now, I think just because I want to be a bit cautious, I mean, I don't know how soon the Germans might want to chuck up aerial resistance, but it may be fairly early on. So I think I want the Spitfires to be with the bombers right from the beginning. So I'm going to put their turn down as 9 TB. So what about my 2 elements of P-47s? That's a trickier question because if we assume the Spitfires are heavily engaged, let's say the German air defenses are really, really daring, and they start striking at the US bomber formations very early on, the Spitfires will be burning their fuel quite quickly. I think as a compromise, I will have my first element of P-47s come in on the 5th target bound turn. So I will put a mission 1 there, P-47 in the unit, and 5 TB for 5th target bound turn. And just for my own reference, drop tank capacity is 8. Ooh, that's a very bad 8. And internal fuel capacity is 20. It's a lot healthier. Now, I hope that would give the first bunch of P-47s, and I am going to make a note. I want those P-47s to be the ones that include the ace pilot, Zemke. I want him to be in on this. And what do I do with my final bunch? I think I have to think about the safety on the return journey as well. So what I'm going to go for, and I hope I guess right, is I'm going to have the final element of P-47s appear on homebound turn 1. So that's a 1 for mission number, P-47s again, and 1 HB for 1 homebound. And because they're P-47s again, it's 8 and 20. Now, just for convenience, if you want to, you can duplicate the record here because it makes it easier for you to cross-reference. And also, it's a good reminder, you can remind yourself of your arrival turn and your starting altitude. So I am going to do that. I'm going to quickly copy over what I've done on the fuel status log. So again, I've divided this into Allied box, German box. So we've got our Spitfires. You can see what I mean about the additional paperwork, can't you? Even by the standards of Down in Flames, there is an awful lot of scribbling going on. So you are 9 TB, you're 5 TB, and you're 1 HB. Now, because of the altitude of the bombers, I want everyone to come in high, just so that they're at exactly the altitude we need them to be. And no time is going to be wasted, climbing or diving unnecessarily. And again, just a reminder, Zemke is going to be with his P-47s. So there we go. That is my planning completed for how the fighters will appear in this game. Now, circumstances have forced me to spread my fighters out to make sure the bombers are covered throughout the trip. But it's also in the rules that unless you have a resource that permits it, you cannot have more than one leader wingman group appear on the same turn. So it kind of forces you to spread your fighters out anyway. Also, regardless of what resources you use, you can only have a maximum of 2 leader wingman groups appear on the same turn. So that's something you have to bear in mind during the planning stages. Now, I will next progress to trying to, I'm going to switch off my American head now, and I'm going to switch over to putting my German head on and trying to work out how I'm going to effectively intercept this large force of US bombers that's heading for Kassel to do horrible things to my war industries. But I'm also conscious that you guys have been really, really patient as I've just shown you basically pro formas while I'm filling them in. As the Allied side has already illustrated the process, I'm not going to detain you and tax your patience watching me fill in the German side. I will comment a bit on my decisions in the next video, but there's no real need to show you. So suffice to say that I am going to try and stretch the defences so that the bombers are harassed throughout their journey. But you don't have to sit there watching me fill all this in. I'll have everything done and the mission set up for the next video so that we can begin. So there we go. That in a nutshell is how you go about setting up with the optional fuel rules for the 8th Air Force campaign in Down in Flames. So if any of you were uncertain about how it worked or had never seen it in action and were curious to give it a try, that is pretty much all it is. It's a lot compared to normal Down in Flames scenarios, but it's not a lot compared to other war games that have a certain amount of written information you have to keep track of. So I will wrap the pre-mission paperwork up there. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video, which will see us winging our way over to Kassel and hoping to shower some bombs on some enemy industry. So before I sign off, it just leaves me, as always, to thank you all very much for following this series. To those of you who asked me about the fuel rules, I really hope this proves helpful. Thank you so much for posing the question. I always love an excuse to get Wild Blue Yonder on the table. To all my veterans, a huge hello, and I'm really glad to be in your company again. Thank you so much for staying with me all this time. It's really, really grand to see you guys, and it's wonderful to have you tagging along on the missions, whatever game I might happen to be playing. If you're a newcomer, a very warm welcome to my channel. If it's Wild Blue Yonder from the Down in Flames series that brought you here, I hope you'll have a look at some of the other videos I've made about this excellent game. Or if it's wargaming generally that's lured you in, then please check out the other videos on my channel. I hope you find something you enjoy. Also, lastly but not least, it would be very, very remiss of me not to say a huge thank you to all of you, because while I was away on my summer break, I came back and I noticed that my number of subscribers had clocked over 500. So I just want to express my gratitude, because when I started this channel, I did so thinking I'd be a fortunate man indeed if I brushed 50 subscribers. And it's really, really humbling that so many of you have taken such an interest and have continued to follow the channel. I'm really amazed, and thank you so much for the support. It means everything. So on that, before we all get all emotional and whatnot, thanks very much again, guys. Really appreciate you all tuning in, and I will see you all for Wheels Up in the next video. Take care. Bye.